Right now, someone just won $1 million deal by staying quiet for 10 seconds. Someone else destroyed their marriage by saying one word too many. The difference? They understood something most people don't. Ever notice how the smartest person in the room usually says the least? Why do you think people get uncomfortable when there's silence in a conversation and immediately rush to fill it? What if the secret to getting what you want isn't learning what to say, but learning when to shut up? Look, I'm not going to promise this will change your life overnight, but I will tell you this. After listening to this for the next hour, you'll start noticing things. Like how your boss reacts when you don't immediately respond to their criticism. How your friends lean in closer when you pause before speaking. How your own thoughts become clearer when you stop drowning them out with constant noise. This isn't about becoming a monk or meditating for hours. This is about using silence the way successful people do, as a weapon, a shield, and sometimes as the most powerful thing you can possibly do. Introduction. So here's the thing. I used to be one of those people who couldn't handle quiet moments. You know the type? Always filling dead air, jumping in before the other person finished talking, nervous laughter when things got too still. Sound familiar? Over the next hour, we're going to dig into some fascinating stuff. Like why Steve Jobs would sit in complete silence during meetings until everyone else squirmed, and then speak last. Why therapists use silence to get people to reveal their deepest secrets. And why that awkward pause you're always trying to avoid. It's actually your secret weapon. We'll talk about what happens in your brain when you finally shut off all the noise. And trust me, it's not what you think. I'll show you exactly how to use silence in your next argument, your next job interview, even your next first date. Plus, we'll cover why some silences feel terrifying while others feel powerful and how to tell the difference. Here's what I want you to do right now. Take a breath. Notice that I'm not rushing through this. See how that feels different? That's intentional. We're going to slow things down together. And if you catch your mind wandering or getting antsy during the quiet moments, that's normal. That's actually the whole point. Your relationship with silence is about to change, starting right now. Chapter 1. The Lost Art of Silence. Okay, quick question. When's the last time you sat somewhere with absolutely no sound? No music, no TV humming in the background, no phone buzzing, no traffic, just you and complete quiet. Can't remember? Yeah, neither can most people. I was in a coffee shop the other day, and this woman couldn't sit still for 30 seconds. She'd check her phone, tap her fingers, look around, check her phone again. It was like watching someone slowly lose their mind. And here's the crazy part. She wasn't waiting for anything important. She was just existing. But existing quietly felt impossible for her. We've created this world where silence feels dangerous, like something's wrong if we're not constantly consuming information or making noise. Think about your morning routine. You probably grab your phone before your feet hit the floor, right? Then music while you shower, podcast during breakfast, radio in the car. We've turned silence into the enemy. But here's what nobody talks about. This constant noise isn't just annoying. It's literally rewiring your brain to crave stimulation. Every ping, every notification, every background sound is training your nervous system to stay on high alert. Your brain never gets a chance to breathe. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine your mind is like a snow globe that someone keeps shaking. All those thoughts, all that information, all those sounds, they're like the snow, constantly swirling around. You can't see clearly through all that chaos. But what happens when you stop shaking the globe? Everything settles, and suddenly you can see what was always there underneath. That's what we've lost, the ability to let things settle. Now, I'm not going to stand here and romanticize the past, but our ancestors understood something we've forgotten. In ancient Greece, they didn't just value wise words, they valued wise silence. They had this concept that the mark of intelligence wasn't how much you knew, but knowing when not to speak. Think about the people you truly respect, not the loudest ones in the room, but the ones who command attention just by being present. They're usually the ones who speak less, but when they do speak, everyone listens. There's something about their silence that makes their words carry more weight. I know a CEO who starts every meeting with 2 minutes of complete silence. Just nothing. At first, people thought he was weird. Now, his company consistently makes better decisions than their competitors. Why? Because they've learned to think before they react. But let's get scientific for a minute. When you're in complete silence, something fascinating happens in your brain. There's this network called the default mode network. Sounds fancy, but it's basically your brain's screensaver. When you're not actively focused on something, this network kicks in and starts making connections between different ideas. All those creative breakthroughs you have in a shower, that's your default mode network working. But here's the problem. If you're constantly feeding your brain information, this network never gets to turn on. It's like having a computer that never gets to defragment its hard drive. Everything slows down. Scientists have found that just 12 minutes of silence can lower your blood pressure, reduce stress hormones, and literally grow new brain cells in areas responsible for learning and memory. 12 minutes. That's shorter than most TikTok scrolling sessions. But we're terrified of those 12 minutes. Why? Because when the noise stops, we have to face what's actually going on in our heads. And sometimes that's not comfortable. I remember the first time I tried to sit in complete silence for 10 minutes. My mind was like a hyperactive toddler. Did I lock the door? What's that weird sound? I should check my email. Oh, I forgot to call Mom. Is this even working? This is stupid. I'm wasting time. Sound familiar? That internal chatter, it's not a bug in your system. It's a feature. Your brain is designed to keep you alive, and part of staying alive is constantly scanning for threats, opportunities, and things that need your attention. But in our modern world, this survival mechanism has gone haywire. Your brain treats your inbox like a saber-toothed tiger. It treats that work deadline like you're being chased by a predator. And it treats silence like something must be wrong. Here's what I want you to understand. Silence isn't the absence of something important. Silence is presence. It's being fully here, fully aware, without needing to do anything about it. When you stop trying to fill every moment with input, something shifts. You start noticing things you've been missing. The way your partner takes a breath before they speak when something's bothering them. The moment in a conversation when someone's energy changes. The exact right time to make your point in a meeting. Most people are operating with what I call notification brain. They're constantly reacting to the next thing, the next sound, the next interruption. But when you develop what I call quiet brain, you start operating from a different place. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of just bounce around like a pinball. I had a client who was a divorce lawyer. High-stress job, right? Constantly dealing with people's worst moments. She came to me because she was burning out, making mistakes, couldn't sleep. We worked on building just 5 minutes of silence in her day. Just 5 minutes. Within 2 weeks, she noticed something. She could tell when her clients were lying. Not because she learned some new technique, but because in the quiet space, she could actually hear the subtle changes in their voice, see the micro expressions she'd been missing. Her success rate improved dramatically just for getting quiet. This isn't about becoming a monk or sitting cross-legged on a mountain. This is about recognizing that in our noisy world, silence has become a superpower. While everyone else is drowning in distraction, you're developing the ability to think clearly, see patterns, and make decisions from a calm, centered place. So here's your first challenge. Tonight, before you go to bed, sit somewhere comfortable and set a timer for just 3 minutes. No phone, no TV, no music. Just you and the quiet. Don't try to meditate or think positive thoughts or any of that. Just sit there. Notice what happens. Notice how your body feels. Notice what thoughts show up. Don't judge them. Don't fight them. Just notice. Because here's the thing. You can't use silence as a tool if you're afraid of it. And most of us are afraid of it because we've forgotten how to be with ourselves without distraction. The people who run the world, the ones making the biggest decisions, the most creative minds, the deepest thinkers, they've all figured out the same secret. In a world full of noise, quiet is where the real power lives. Chapter 2, The Psychology of Powerful Silence. All right, so you've probably experienced this. You're in a conversation and there's this pause. Maybe 3 seconds, maybe 5, And suddenly you feel this overwhelming urge to fill that space with words. Any words, even if they're stupid words. Why does that happen? It's because silence makes us feel exposed. When there's nothing to hide behind, no words, no noise, no distraction, we suddenly become aware that someone might actually see us. Really see us. And that's terrifying for most people. I watched this happen in a boardroom last month. The CEO asked a simple question. What do you think about this proposal? Instead of waiting for thoughtful answers, 3 people immediately started talking over each other. Not because they had brilliant insights, but because the silence felt dangerous. They were literally competing to escape the quiet. But here's what's fascinating. The one person who didn't jump in, she waited, let the chaos settle. Then she spoke one sentence that completely changed the direction of the meeting. Her silence had created space for something important to emerge. Think about the last time you were in an uncomfortable conversation. Maybe someone criticized you or asked you a difficult question. What was your first instinct? Most people immediately defend, explain, or deflect. But what if you just said nothing? I know a therapist who uses this technique. When a patient makes a statement that's clearly not the whole truth, she doesn't challenge them. She doesn't ask follow-up questions. She just waits. And you know what happens? People can't handle the silence. They start talking. And usually, the second thing they say is much more honest than the first. It's like silence holds up a mirror. When you're not filling the space with your own agenda, your own reactions, your own need to be heard, the other person has to face what they actually said. They have to sit with it. And often, they'll correct themselves, elaborate, or reveal something they never intended to share. I tried this with my teenage daughter. She came home obviously upset about something, and my usual response would be to pepper her with questions. What happened? Who did what? How can I help? This time, I just sat next to her and waited. After about 2 minutes, which felt like 2 hours, she started talking. Really talking. Not the surface-level stuff, but what was actually bothering her. Here's the thing most people don't understand about silence in relationships. When you rush to fill quiet moments, you're actually communicating something. You're saying, I'm not comfortable with who you are when you're not performing for me. But when you can sit with someone in silence, you're saying you don't have to entertain me. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are right now. That's why silence can be more intimate than words. It's pure presence without agenda. But let's talk about power dynamics, because this gets really interesting. Have you ever noticed that the most respected people in any room are usually the ones who speak the least? They're not necessarily the smartest or most experienced, but there's something about their restraint that makes others lean in. It's called the authority of silence, and it works because of a weird quirk in human psychology. We assume that people who don't need to talk constantly must have something valuable to say when they do speak. It's like scarcity economics for conversation. Warren Buffett is famous for this. In meetings, he'll sit quietly while everyone else debates and argues. He listens, processes, and then when he finally speaks, the room goes dead quiet. Not because he's the boss, though he is, but because his silence has created anticipation. His words carry weight because he doesn't waste them. There's this negotiation technique called tactical silence that sales professionals use. After they make an offer, they stop talking. Completely. The first person to speak usually makes the next concession. It sounds manipulative, but it's actually just human nature. Silence creates pressure, and most people will do anything to relieve that pressure. I saw this in action at a car dealership. The salesperson quoted a price and then just waited. The customer immediately started justifying why they couldn't pay that much, talking themselves down from their original position. The salesperson never had to negotiate. The silence did all the work. But here's where it gets ethically interesting. You can use this same principle in positive ways. When someone shares something personal with you, instead of immediately responding with your own story or advice, try staying quiet for a few extra seconds. Let what they said land. Let them feel heard. Often, they'll go deeper, share more, or come to their own insights. I learned this from a friend who's a social worker. She told me that the most healing thing she does isn't giving advice or solving problems. It's creating space for people to be heard. Really heard. And that space is silence. Now, let's talk about the difference between awkward silence and powerful silence, because they're not the same thing. Awkward silence happens when people are uncomfortable with each other or the situation. It's filled with tension and the desire to escape. Powerful silence? That's intentional. It's comfortable. It has presence behind it. Think about sitting with someone you love, watching a sunset. No one feels the need to comment on every color or explain what they're experiencing. The silence isn't empty. It's full of shared appreciation. That's powerful silence. Or consider this scenario. You're in a meeting and someone makes a statement that's clearly wrong or problematic. Instead of immediately correcting them, you pause. You let their words hang in the air. Sometimes they'll realize their mistake and correct themselves. Sometimes someone else will address it. And sometimes your silence communicates disagreement more effectively than any argument could. I watched a master negotiator do this once. The other party made an unreasonable demand, and instead of getting defensive or arguing back, she just looked at them. For maybe 10 seconds, the silence said everything. Really? That's what you're going with? Without saying a word, she had shifted the entire dynamic. But here's what I find most interesting about powerful silence. It's not about manipulation or control. It's about creating space for truth to emerge. When you're not constantly reacting, defending, or trying to prove your point, you allow the conversation to evolve naturally. Let me tell you about someone who completely changed my understanding of this. Her name was Eleanor, and she was in her 70s when I met her. She had this amazing quality. When she was with you, she was completely present. She didn't feel the need to fill every moment with chatter. She would ask a question and then wait for your real answer. Not the quick, surface-level response most people give, but what you actually thought. People would seek her out for advice, not because she had all the answers, but because she had the patience to let you find your own answers. Her silence was like a gift. It said, "You're worth waiting for. Your thoughts matter. Take your time." That's when I realized that silence isn't about withholding something. It's about offering something, your full attention, your presence, your willingness to be uncomfortable while someone else finds their truth. Think about the people in your life who have this quality. They're probably not the loudest or most talkative, but when you walk away from a conversation with them, you feel seen, heard, like you matter. That's the power of intentional silence. Now, I want to address something important. Some of you might be thinking, this sounds like emotional manipulation. And you're right to be cautious. There's a difference between using silence as a tool for connection and using it as a weapon. Manipulative silence is cold. It's withholding communication to punish or control someone. It's the silent treatment, stonewalling, or refusing to engage as a way to win. That's not what we're talking about here. Powerful silence is warm. It's creating space for deeper connection. It's listening not just to respond, but to understand. It's being comfortable with quiet moments instead of frantically trying to fill them. The difference is intention. Are you staying quiet to punish someone or to understand them better? Are you using silence to avoid responsibility or to create space for truth? The energy behind your silence matters as much as the silence itself. Here's a practical way to start practicing this. In your next conversation, when someone finishes speaking, count to 3 before you respond. Just 3 seconds. Notice what happens. Notice if they add something else. Notice if your response is different when you give yourself that pause. Most people speak in response to the first thing they heard, not the most important thing that was said. That 3-second pause gives you time to process the whole message, not just react to part of it. I tried this with my partner during an argument. Instead of immediately defending myself when she criticized something I'd done, I paused. In that pause, I heard something I'd missed. She wasn't really angry about the thing she was criticizing. She was feeling unheard about something else entirely. My silence created space for the real conversation to begin. Another powerful technique is what I call curious silence. When someone says something that surprises you or that you disagree with, instead of immediately stating your position, try staying quiet with a genuinely curious expression. Often, They'll elaborate and you'll understand their perspective better. Sometimes, they'll even talk themselves out of their original position. This works because most people aren't used to being truly listened to. They're used to people waiting for their turn to talk. When you give someone your full, silent attention, it's so rare that it actually creates intimacy. I want to leave you with this thought. In a world where everyone is fighting to be heard, the person who knows how to listen, really listen with their whole presence, becomes incredibly valuable. Your silence can be a gift you give to others. It says, "You matter enough for me to stop thinking about what I want to say next and just be here with you." The most powerful people I know aren't the ones who can talk their way out of anything. They're the ones who can sit with anything. They're comfortable with discomfort. They don't need to fill every space with noise. And because of that, when they do speak, people pay attention. Think about someone in your life who has this quality. Someone who doesn't need to constantly fill silence, who makes you feel heard when you're with them. What is it about their presence that draws you in? What would change in your relationships if you could offer that same quality of attention to others? Chapter 3. Silence in Communication. You know that moment when someone asks you a question and you immediately start answering? Before you've even finished processing what they really asked? We've all been there. It's like our mouths are faster than our brains, rushing to fill any gap in conversation. But what if that gap isn't meant to be filled? What if that pause is actually where the real conversation begins? Think about the last time you watched two people have a deep conversation. Not small talk, not surface chatter, but one of those exchanges where you could feel something important happening. If you pay attention, you'll notice something interesting. There are spaces between their words. Moments where neither person is talking, but communication is still happening. Those spaces? That's where meaning lives. Most of us treat conversation like a tennis match. Someone hits the ball, we hit it back. Fast exchanges, quick reflexes, no time to think. But the most meaningful conversations aren't tennis matches. They're more like chess games. Every move matters. Every pause has purpose. When someone finishes speaking, there's this invisible timer that starts ticking in our heads. 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and suddenly we feel this pressure to respond, to prove we were listening, to show we have something valuable to add. But what if instead of rushing to respond, we gave their words time to settle? Silence after someone speaks isn't empty time. It's processing time. It's the difference between hearing words and understanding meaning. When you pause before responding, you're telling the other person that what they said matters enough to think about. Watch what happens in your next conversation when you wait just 3 extra seconds before responding. The person who just spoke will often add something. Actually, what I really mean is, or the thing that's really bothering me is, they'll give you the real information, not just the surface layer. It's like they need permission to go deeper, and your silence gives them that permission. Now let's talk about what happens when conversations get difficult. Someone says something that triggers you. Maybe they criticize something you care about, or they share an opinion that makes your blood boil. Your natural instinct is to jump in immediately, to correct them, defend yourself, or prove them wrong. But here's what's fascinating. That immediate reaction, it's almost never your wisest response. It's your emotional response. And emotional responses, while valid, aren't always helpful for actually solving problems or deepening understanding. When you feel that urge to react immediately, that's actually a signal. It's your brain saying this matters to me. And if it matters to you, doesn't it deserve more than a knee-jerk reaction? Try this instead. When someone says something that makes you want to respond immediately, pause. Take a breath. Let their words exist in the space between you for a moment. Sometimes you'll realize they're not actually attacking what you thought they were attacking. Sometimes you'll hear the hurt or fear underneath their words that you missed in your rush to defend. This doesn't mean you become a doormat. It doesn't mean you don't respond at all. It means you respond from a place of choice rather than reaction. There's a difference between someone who can't speak and someone who chooses not to speak. The first suggests weakness or fear. The second suggests strength and intention. When you pause in conversation, you're not stuck, you're choosing. And that choice changes everything. Let's dive into something that makes most people uncomfortable: silence in negotiations. Whether you're buying a car, asking for a raise, or trying to resolve a conflict with your neighbor, silence can be your most powerful tool. Here's why this works. When you make a request or state your position and then stop talking, you're putting the ball in their court. Not in a manipulative way, but in a clear way. You've said what you need to say. Now it's their turn to respond. Most people can't handle this. They'll either accept your position, make a counteroffer, or start explaining why they can't give you what you want. But here's the key. They're responding to your actual request, not getting distracted by extra words or justifications. When you keep talking after making a request, you often end up negotiating against yourself. I like a raise to 50,000. I know that might be too much. Maybe 45 would be okay. You just went from 50 to 45 without the other person saying a word. Silence protects your position. It lets your request stand on its own merit. But the most powerful use of silence in negotiations isn't about getting what you want. It's about understanding what the other person actually needs. When they're explaining their position, resist the urge to interrupt with objections or alternatives. Let them finish completely. Then let there be a pause. In that pause, they'll often reveal information they didn't intend to share. The real reason they can't meet your request. The constraint they're working under that you didn't know about. The creative solution that works for both of you. People think negotiation is about talking, but skilled negotiators know it's about listening. And you can't listen while you're talking. Now, I want to talk about something that might sound strange. Silence as a form of love. When someone you care about is going through something difficult, your instinct is probably to help. To offer advice, share your own experiences, or try to fix their problem. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is nothing. Just be there. Just listen. Just let them feel whatever they're feeling without trying to change it or solve it. This is hard for most of us because we feel helpless when we can't fix things. But your presence, your quiet, attentive presence, is often more helpful than any advice you could give. When someone is in pain, they don't always need solutions. Sometimes they just need to be seen in their pain. They need someone to witness what they're going through without trying to make it better or make it go away. Your silent attention tells them what you're experiencing matters. You don't have to perform or pretend for me. You can just be human here. This kind of presence is rare in our world. Most people listen just long enough to formulate their response. But when you listen with your whole being, when you're genuinely curious about their experience rather than focused on your reply, something magical happens. They feel truly heard. And feeling heard is healing in itself. Let's talk about what this looks like practically. Someone shares something vulnerable with you. Maybe they're struggling at work, or they're worried about their relationship, or they're questioning a major life decision. Your natural response might be to jump in with suggestions or reassurance. Instead, try this. After they finish speaking, wait 3 seconds before you respond. In those 3 seconds, ask yourself, what did they actually say? What are they really asking for? Do they want advice? Or do they just need to be heard? Most of the time, they just need to be heard. Your response might be as simple as, that sounds really difficult, or tell me more about that. You're not trying to fix anything. You're creating space for them to explore their own thoughts and feelings. This is especially important when someone is angry or upset. The worst time to offer solutions is when someone is in the middle of processing their emotions. They can't hear your advice because they're not in a learning mode, they're in a feeling mode. Silence gives them permission to feel without judgment. It says, your emotions are valid. You don't have to defend them or explain them away. Just experience them. Here's something interesting about difficult conversations. Most of them aren't actually about the thing people are arguing about. They're about feeling unheard, misunderstood, or dismissed. When you respond to anger with silence, not cold silence, but warm, attentive silence, you're addressing the real issue. You're saying, I'm not going to dismiss your feelings. I'm not going to defend myself right now. I'm going to listen to what you're really trying to tell me. This doesn't work if your silence is strategic or manipulative. People can sense the difference between genuine presence and calculated quiet. Your intention matters more than your technique. The goal isn't to win the conversation or avoid conflict. The goal is to understand what's really happening between you and the other person. Sometimes what's really happening has nothing to do with the surface conversation. Maybe they're stressed about something else entirely. Maybe they're feeling disconnected from you, and picking a fight about dishes is easier than saying, "I miss feeling close to you." Silence creates space for these deeper truths to emerge. Now, let's address something important: the difference between strategic silence and avoidance. Some people use silence as a way to escape difficult conversations or avoid taking responsibility. That's not what we're talking about here. Strategic silence engages with the conversation. It's active listening. It's being present with discomfort rather than running from it. Avoidance silence checks out of the conversation entirely. If you're staying quiet because you don't want to deal with conflict, that's avoidance. If you're staying quiet because you want to understand the conflict better, that's strategy. The difference is intention and engagement. Strategic silence pays attention. Avoidance silence shuts down. Here's your practical exercise for this week. The next time someone shares something personal with you, whether it's exciting news, a frustration, or a worry, try responding with 3 seconds of silence before speaking. Just 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, notice what happens. Do they add more information? Do you understand their message differently? Does your eventual response change? Pay attention to how that pause changes the quality of your conversation. Notice whether they seem more or less satisfied with the exchange. Most importantly, notice how it feels to give someone the gift of your complete attention. Not your advice, not your similar story, not your immediate reaction, just your presence. Because here's what I've learned about communication. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the space to be heard completely before you say anything. In a world where everyone is competing to be heard, the person who knows how to listen becomes incredibly valuable. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of attention, curiosity, and care. And that kind of presence, that's what transforms ordinary conversations into moments of real connection. Chapter 4: Inner Silence, the Path to Self-Discovery. When was the last time you sat in complete silence? Not just external quiet, no phones, no music, no background noise, but internal silence too. No mental chatter, no running commentary, no endless loop of thoughts about what you need to do tomorrow. If you're like most people, you probably can't remember. We live in a world that's not just noisy on the outside, but chaotic on the inside. Our minds are constantly buzzing with thoughts, worries, plans, and distractions. We've become so used to this internal noise that we mistake it for normal. But what if I told you that underneath all that mental chatter, there's something else? Something quieter, deeper, more essential? What if the real you, the part of you that knows things before you think them, that feels things before you name them, lives in the spaces between thoughts? Most of us are afraid to find out. There's a difference between sitting in a quiet room and experiencing true silence. You can turn off every device, close every door, and still have a mind that's racing with thoughts. External silence is just the absence of sound. Internal silence is the absence of mental noise. And that's where things get interesting. Because when you stop the constant stream of thoughts, when you stop analyzing and planning and worrying, something else emerges. Not emptiness, presence. Not nothing, everything. But let's be honest about why most people avoid this. When you first try to sit in real silence, it's uncomfortable. Your mind isn't used to being still. It starts throwing up all kinds of distractions. Suddenly you remember that email you forgot to send, or you start planning dinner, or you notice how your back feels against the chair. This isn't a problem to solve. It's information to notice. Your mind is showing you how it normally operates. It's revealing the patterns of thought that usually run in the background without your awareness. Think about it like this. Most of the time, your thoughts are like a radio that's always on. You hear the music, but you're not really listening to it. It's just background noise. But when you try to turn the radio off, suddenly you notice how loud it was. You realize it's been affecting your mood, your energy, your ability to focus. The same thing happens with your thoughts. When you try to quiet your mind, you realize how much mental noise you've been carrying around. And that realization is the first step toward freedom. Now, different cultures have known about this for thousands of years. They've developed practices specifically designed to help people find this inner silence. Some call it meditation, others call it prayer, contemplation, or mindfulness. The names don't matter. What matters is the recognition that humans need this quiet space to function fully. In Zen Buddhism, there's a concept called beginner's mind. It's the idea that when you approach something with fresh eyes, without all your preconceptions and assumptions, you can see it clearly. But how do you develop fresh eyes? You start by clearing away the mental clutter that's blocking your vision. Christian mystics have a practice called centering prayer, where you choose a simple word or phrase and return to it whenever your mind wanders. The goal isn't to stop thinking. It's to notice when you're thinking and gently return to the center. To find that quiet place where you can just be. Hindu traditions speak of witness consciousness, the part of you that observes your thoughts and emotions without being caught up in them. It's like sitting by a river and watching the water flow by. You're not trying to stop the river, but you're not jumping in and getting swept away either. What all these traditions understand is that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who observes your thoughts. And when you learn to step back from the constant stream of mental activity, you discover something remarkable. There's a part of you that's always been quiet, always been still, always been at peace. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you spend time in this inner silence, you start to notice things about yourself that you never saw before. Not big dramatic revelations necessarily, but subtle awareness. You notice patterns in your thinking. You see how certain thoughts trigger certain emotions. You become aware of the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what's possible. It's like cleaning a dirty window. You don't realize how much the grime was affecting your view until you start wiping it away. Suddenly, you can see clearly again. Most people live their entire lives without ever meeting themselves. They know their preferences, their habits, their reactions. But they don't know the deeper part, the part that exists before preferences, before habits, before reactions. That part can only be found in silence. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds too mystical, too spiritual. But there's nothing mystical about noticing your own thoughts. There's nothing spiritual about becoming aware of your mental patterns. This is basic self-knowledge. When you don't know your own mind, you're at the mercy of whatever thoughts happen to arise. You react to your thoughts as if they were facts, as if they were you. But when you spend time in silence, you realize that thoughts are just mental events. They come and go like clouds across the sky. And once you realize that, you have a choice. You can engage with the thoughts that serve you and let go of the ones that don't. But you can't make that choice until you can see the thoughts clearly. This is why silence is so powerful for problem solving. When your mind is quiet, you can hear the subtle voice of intuition. You can sense solutions that don't come from thinking harder, but from stepping back and seeing the bigger picture. How many times have you struggled with a problem, thinking and analyzing and worrying about it, only to have the answer come to you when you're in the shower or taking a walk? That's not coincidence. That's what happens when your mind gets quiet enough to hear its own wisdom. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, the fear of being alone with your thoughts. Most people avoid silence because they're afraid of what they might find there. What if you discover you're not who you thought you were? What if you realize you're not happy with your life? What if you find sadness or anger or disappointment that you've been avoiding? Here's the thing about those fears. They're based on a misunderstanding. You're not going to discover terrible things about yourself in silence. You're going to discover things that are already there, things that have been affecting your life, whether you acknowledge them or not. The sadness you're afraid to feel, it's already influencing your choices. The anger you're avoiding, it's already shaping your relationships. The disappointment you don't want to face, it's already limiting your possibilities. Silence doesn't create these feelings, it reveals them. And once you can see them clearly, you can work with them consciously instead of being controlled by them unconsciously. Think of it like this. Imagine you're driving a car at night with dirty headlights. You can still drive, but you're more likely to miss important things, road signs, obstacles, beautiful scenery. Cleaning your headlights doesn't create new obstacles, but it helps you see what's already there. That's what silence does for your inner life. It cleans the lens through which you see yourself and your world. Now, you don't need to become a monk or spend hours in meditation to access this inner silence. You can start with just a few minutes a day. The key is consistency, not duration. Find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted. Sit comfortably. You don't need any special position or posture. Close your eyes or focus on a single point, and then simply pay attention to what's happening in your mind. Don't try to stop your thoughts. Don't judge them as good or bad. Just notice them. When you realize you've been caught up in thinking, gently return your attention to your breath or to the present moment. This isn't about achieving some perfect state of emptiness. It's about becoming familiar with your own mental landscape. It's about learning to distinguish between the part of you that thinks and the part of you that notices the thinking. And here's what you'll discover. That noticing part, that awareness, is incredibly stable and peaceful. It's not affected by whatever thoughts or emotions are passing through. It's like the sky. Storms may pass through it, but the sky itself remains unchanged. The more time you spend connected to this deeper part of yourself, the more you'll trust it. You'll find yourself making decisions from a place of inner knowing rather than external pressure. You'll respond to situations from your center rather than your reactivity. This isn't about becoming passive or withdrawn. It's about becoming more authentically yourself. When you're not constantly caught up in mental noise, you can hear your own voice more clearly. You can sense what truly matters to you, what genuinely brings you joy, what you actually want to contribute to the world. Let's practice this together right now. For the next 30 seconds, we're going to sit in silence together. Don't worry about doing it perfectly. Just breathe naturally and notice whatever arises in your awareness. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Now, simply rest in this moment. Notice your breath. Notice any sound around you. Notice any thoughts that arise. You don't need to do anything with what you notice. Just observe. Now take another deep breath and gently open your eyes if they were closed. What did you notice in that silence? Maybe your mind was busy with thoughts. Maybe you felt restless or peaceful. Maybe you became aware of sounds you hadn't noticed before. Whatever you experienced is perfect. There's no right or wrong way to sit in silence. The only goal is to become more familiar with your own inner landscape. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes, and something interesting starts to happen. You begin to carry a sense of that inner silence with you throughout your day. Even in the middle of busy activities, you can access that quiet center. You start to respond to life from a place of stillness rather than reactivity. You make decisions from clarity rather than confusion. You speak from authenticity rather than anxiety. This is what I mean when I say that silence reveals your authentic self. It's not that you become a different person. It's that you become more truly yourself. You stop living from the surface level of thoughts and reactions and start living from the deeper level of awareness and wisdom. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more comfortable you become with inner silence, the more present you become with others. When you're not constantly caught up in your own mental noise, you can truly listen. You can truly see. You can truly connect. Because authentic connection isn't about what you say or what you do. It's about who you are when you're not trying to be anyone else. In the silence between thoughts, you'll find your truest self. Not the self that's defined by your roles or your achievements or your problems, but the self that simply is. The self that was there before you learned to think, that will be there after every thought has passed. That self is your greatest resource. It's your source of creativity, wisdom, and peace. And it's always available to you, just a moment of silence away. So I invite you to explore this inner territory. Start small, just a few minutes a day. Notice what happens when you stop doing and start being. Pay attention to the quality of awareness that emerges when you're not trying to think your way through everything. You might be surprised by what you discover, not about the world around you, but about the world within you. The world that's been there all along, waiting patiently for you to get quiet enough to notice. Chapter 5. Silence as Emotional Intelligence. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the tension, even though no one was arguing? Or sensed that someone was upset before they said a word? That's not magic, that's emotional intelligence. And the people who are best at reading these invisible signals have one thing in common. They know how to be quiet and pay attention. Most of us are so busy managing our own emotions and thoughts that we miss the emotional currents flowing around us. We're like someone trying to hear a whisper while shouting. But when you learn to quiet your internal noise, you suddenly become aware of information that was always there. Think about the last time you were in a meeting where someone said, "I'm fine," but everything about their body language screamed the opposite. Their voice was tight, their shoulders were tense, their smile didn't reach their eyes. The words said one thing, but the silence between the words said something completely different. The people who catch these signals aren't psychic. They're just paying attention to the whole conversation, not just the verbal part. They're listening to what's not being said as much as what is being said. This is what emotional intelligence really is. It's not about being touchy-feely or overly sensitive. It's about being aware. Aware of your own emotional state, aware of others' emotional states, and aware of how emotions move through groups and relationships. And that awareness requires silence. Not just external quiet, but internal stillness. When your mind is racing with your own reactions and judgments, you can't pick up on the subtle emotional information that's constantly flowing around you. Let's start with something you can practice right now. The next time you're in a conversation with someone, try this. Instead of thinking about what you're going to say next, spend a few seconds just observing them. Look at their face, their posture, the pace of their speech. What do you notice that you might normally miss? You might discover that your coworker, who always seems confident, actually fidgets with their pen when they're nervous. Or that your friend who jokes around a lot gets quieter when they're genuinely worried about something. These aren't secrets. They're just signals that most people are too distracted to notice. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you start paying attention to these signals, you also become more aware of your own emotional patterns. You notice that you interrupt more when you're anxious. You see that you avoid eye contact when you feel guilty. You realize that your voice gets higher when you're trying to convince someone of something you're not sure about yourself. This self-awareness is the foundation of emotional regulation. You can't manage what you don't notice. And you can't notice what's happening inside you when you're caught up in reacting to what's happening outside you. Most people think emotional intelligence means being good with feelings. But it's really about having space between feeling and reaction. That space is where choice lives. When someone criticizes you, there's usually an immediate emotional response. Maybe anger, maybe hurt, maybe defensiveness. Most people react from that first emotion without even realizing they're doing it. They defend themselves, counterattack, or shut down. But what if you could create a pause between the criticism and your response? Not a long pause, just a few seconds. Long enough to notice what you're feeling. Long enough to ask yourself, what's really happening here? Are they trying to hurt me? Or are they trying to communicate something important? What response would actually help this situation? That pause is where emotional wisdom is born. It's the difference between reacting and responding. And it's only possible when you can tolerate a moment of silence, even when your emotions are activated. Let's talk about what this looks like in practice. Someone at work gives you feedback that stings. Your first impulse might be to explain why they're wrong or why the situation isn't your fault. But instead of speaking immediately, you take 5 seconds. You breathe. You notice the heat in your chest, the tension in your jaw. In those 5 seconds, you might realize that underneath your defensiveness, you're actually embarrassed because part of what they said is true. Or you might recognize that their feedback is less about you and more about their own frustration with something else. Either way, your response becomes more thoughtful and less reactive. This isn't about suppressing your emotions or pretending you don't feel them. It's about giving yourself enough space to feel them fully without being controlled by them. There's a difference between having emotions and being had by emotions. When you're being had by an emotion, it's making your decisions for you. You're angry. so you say something cutting. You're hurt, so you withdraw. You're scared, so you avoid the conversation altogether. But when you have emotions, when you can feel them without being consumed by them, you can use them as information. Your anger might be telling you that a boundary has been crossed. Your hurt might be showing you what you care about. Your fear might be highlighting something that needs your attention. The key is creating enough inner space to receive this information without immediately acting on it. Now, let's talk about something that might surprise you: how silence can be a form of empathy. When someone is sharing something difficult or emotional with you, your natural instinct might be to jump in with reassurance, advice, or your own similar experience. You want to help, to connect, to make them feel better. But sometimes the most empathetic response is to simply witness what they're going through without trying to fix it or change it. Your silent presence can communicate something that words can't. What you're experiencing is valid. You don't have to perform or pretend for me. I can handle being with you in this difficult moment. This kind of presence is rare. Most people are uncomfortable with others' strong emotions. They want to make the sadness go away, calm the anger down, or solve the problem. But when you can sit with someone in their emotional experience without needing to change it, you're offering them something precious, the experience of being truly seen and accepted. Think about a time when you were going through something difficult. What did you need more? Someone to tell you how to fix it, or someone to acknowledge that it was hard? Someone to compare your situation to their own, or someone to focus completely on what you were experiencing? Most people need to be heard before they can hear. They need to be understood before they can understand. And that process often requires silence. Not empty silence, but full, attentive silence. This doesn't mean you never offer support or guidance. It means you start by creating space for the person to fully express what they're going through. And you can't create that space if you're busy formulating your response while they're still talking. Here's something else about emotional intelligence and silence. It helps you distinguish between different types of emotional energy in groups. Every family, every workplace, every social circle has its own emotional dynamics. Some of these dynamics are healthy and some aren't. When you're caught up in the action, when you're reacting to whatever's happening in the moment, it's hard to see these patterns clearly. But when you can step back and observe, when you can be present without being reactive, you start to notice things. You see how certain people always deflect with humor when things get serious. You notice how conflict gets avoided by changing the subject. You observe how some people's emotions dominate the room while others' emotions get ignored. This awareness doesn't make you responsible for fixing everyone else's emotional patterns, but it does help you make conscious choices about how you want to participate in these dynamics. Maybe you realize that you usually go along with the deflection because you're uncomfortable with conflict too. Maybe you see that you shut down when certain people get emotional because their intensity triggers your own anxiety. Maybe you notice that you take on everyone else's feelings without even realizing it. Once you can see these patterns clearly, you can start to respond from choice rather than habit. You can stay present when someone is upset instead of automatically trying to calm them down. You can speak up when something important is being avoided instead of going along with the deflection. But all of this requires the ability to be still in the middle of emotional turbulence, to observe what's happening without immediately reacting to it, to feel your own emotions without being overwhelmed by them. This is why silence is such a powerful tool for emotional intelligence. It's not about being passive or withdrawn. It's about being present and aware. It's about having enough inner stillness to notice what's actually happening, both inside yourself and in the relationships around you. Let's practice this together. Think of a recent situation where you reacted emotionally to something someone said or did. Maybe you got defensive or angry or hurt. Now imagine that same situation, but this time, picture yourself pausing for 5 seconds before responding. In those 5 seconds, what might you have noticed about your own emotional state? What might you have observed about the other person that you missed in your rush to react? How might your response have been different if it came from awareness rather than reactivity? This isn't about judging your original response or wishing you had done something different. It's about recognizing that you have more options than you might realize in emotional situations. Here's your real-world application for this week. Before reacting to criticism or conflict, give yourself the gift of a silent pause. Count to 5 and notice how your response changes. Don't worry about getting it right every time. Just experiment with creating a little space between trigger and reaction. You might be surprised by what you discover. Maybe you'll realize that the criticism isn't as devastating as it first seemed. Maybe you'll see that the person giving feedback is more nervous than angry. Maybe you'll find that your emotional response has information for you that you would have missed if you'd reacted immediately. The goal isn't to become emotionally numb or to stop having strong feelings. The goal is to develop a different relationship with your emotions, one where they inform you rather than control you. When you can create space around your emotional experiences, you become more skillful in relationships. You can stay connected to people even when they're struggling. You can communicate your needs without attacking others. You can set boundaries without building walls. And perhaps most importantly, you can be fully present with your own emotional life. You can feel deeply without being overwhelmed. You can care passionately without losing yourself. You can be moved by life without being swept away by it. This is what emotional maturity looks like, not the absence of strong feelings, but the presence of awareness around those feelings. Not the ability to control your emotions, but the ability to be present with them. And all of this becomes possible when you learn to find stillness in the middle of emotional storms. When you can access that quiet center that exists regardless of what you're feeling or what's happening around you. Silence is the space where emotional wisdom is born. It's where you learn to distinguish between what you're feeling and who you are. It's where you discover that you can be touched by life without being destroyed by it. In that space, you become someone others can trust with their emotions because you've learned to trust yourself with your own. Chapter 6: Creative Silence, Unlocking Innovation. When was the last time you had a brilliant idea while scrolling through your phone? Or during a loud, chaotic meeting? Probably never. But I bet you've had great ideas in the shower, on a quiet walk, or right before falling asleep. There's a reason for that, and it's not coincidence. Your brain has two main modes of operation. There's the focused mode, when you're actively concentrating on something, solving a specific problem, or learning new information. This is the mode most of us spend our waking hours in. Then there's something called the default mode network, what happens when your brain is supposedly doing nothing. But here's the fascinating part. Your brain is never actually doing nothing. When you're not actively focused on a task, when you're daydreaming or letting your mind wander, your brain shifts into this default mode. And that's when the magic happens. In default mode, different regions of your brain start talking to each other in ways they don't when you're focused. Memories connect with new information. Random thoughts link up with problems you've been trying to solve. Ideas that seemed completely unrelated suddenly reveal their hidden connections. This is why you get your best ideas in the shower. The warm water, the routine of washing, the lack of external stimulation, it all creates the perfect conditions for your default mode network to activate. Your conscious mind relaxes its grip, and your unconscious mind starts making connections. But here's the problem with modern life. We've almost eliminated the conditions that allow this process to happen. We fill every quiet moment with input. Podcasts while walking, music while working, scrolling while waiting. We're constantly feeding our brains new information without giving them time to process what they already have. It's like trying to cook a complex meal while someone keeps bringing you new ingredients every few seconds. You never get a chance to see what you're working with, let alone combine things in creative ways. Think about the greatest creative minds throughout history. Einstein didn't discover relativity during a brainstorming session. He was taking long, solitary walks. Darwin didn't develop evolutionary theory in a bustling laboratory. He spent years quietly observing nature. Mozart didn't compose symphonies in loud, chaotic environments. He found quiet spaces where his mind could play with musical ideas. These weren't accidents. These creative giants intuitively understood something that neuroscience is now proving. breakthrough thinking requires mental space. It needs silence, both external and internal, to emerge. Virginia Woolf wrote about needing a room of one's own, not just physical space, but mental space. Somewhere the mind could roam freely without interruption or judgment. Maya Angelou rented a bare hotel room with nothing but a Bible, a thesaurus, and yellow legal pads. She'd arrive at 6:30 a.m. and write until 12:30 p.m. in complete silence. These weren't quirky habits. They were creative necessities. These artists understood that creativity isn't just about having good ideas. It's about creating the conditions where good ideas can find you. Now, you might be thinking, but I'm not Einstein or Mozart. I'm just trying to solve everyday problems. But the same principles apply, whether you're designing a new product, figuring out how to organize your kitchen, or trying to resolve a conflict with your teenager. Every creative challenge, big or small, benefits from the same process. You gather information, you wrestle with the problem consciously, and then you step back and let your unconscious mind work on it. But that last step only happens in silence. Here's something interesting about how this works in practice. Have you ever noticed that when you're stuck on a problem, the harder you think about it, the more stuck you become? You're grinding gears, forcing your brain to work in focus mode, but focus mode can only see what it already knows how to see. Default mode, on the other hand, can see around corners. It can spot patterns that focused thinking missed. It can combine ideas from completely different domains. But it only activates when you stop trying so hard. This is why so many creative professionals build quiet time into their schedules. Not as a luxury, but as a necessity. They understand that creativity isn't just about the time you spend actively working on something. It's also about the time you spend not working on it, letting your mind wander and make unexpected connections. But let's talk about something that makes most people uncomfortable: boredom. We've developed such an aversion to being bored that we'll do almost anything to avoid it. Check our phones, turn on music, start scrolling. But boredom isn't the enemy of creativity, it's the doorway. When you're bored, your brain starts looking for something interesting to think about. It begins to play with ideas, to imagine possibilities, to create stories. But if you immediately escape boredom by grabbing your phone, you shut down this process before it can begin. Children understand this instinctively. Give a child nothing to do, and they'll create entire worlds in their imagination. They'll turn cardboard boxes into spaceships, sticks into magic wands, backyard puddles into vast oceans. But give that same child constant entertainment, and their creative muscles begin to atrophy. The same thing happens to adults. When we fill every moment with input, we lose our ability to generate output. We become consumers of other people's creativity instead of creators of our own. This doesn't mean you need to live like a monk, but it does mean being intentional about creating space for your mind to wander. Maybe it's a 10-minute walk without headphones. Maybe it's sitting with your morning coffee before checking your phone. Maybe it's staring out the window while you wait for your computer to start up. These might seem like small moments, but they add up. Each time you choose silence over stimulation, you're giving your brain permission to surprise you. Now, let's get practical about how to apply this. The next time you're facing a creative challenge, whether it's planning a presentation, solving a work problem, or figuring out how to redecorate your living room, try this approach. First, spend some focused time gathering information and thinking actively about the problem. Research, brainstorm, analyze. Get your conscious mind fully engaged with the challenge. Then step away. Do something that doesn't require much mental effort. Take a walk, do the dishes, pull weeds in the garden. But here's the key: do it in silence. No podcasts, no music, no phone calls. Just you and whatever simple activity you're doing. Don't try to solve the problem during this time. In fact, try not to think about it at all. Let your mind wander wherever it wants to go. Trust that your unconscious is still working on the challenge, even though you're not consciously focused on it. You might be surprised by what happens. Solutions often emerge not as complete, fully formed ideas, but as gentle nudges or subtle shifts in perspective. You might suddenly see the problem differently, or remember something relevant that you'd forgotten, or make a connection that hadn't occurred to you before. This process works because silence gives your brain permission to operate differently. Instead of trying to force solutions through sheer mental effort, you're creating space for insights to arise naturally. It's like the difference between trying to catch a butterfly by chasing it and sitting still until it lands on your shoulder. Some things can't be captured by force. They can only be received with patience. Here's your creative challenge for this week. Spend 10 minutes in silence with no input. No music, no podcasts, no reading, no screens. Just sit or walk in quiet and notice what emerges. Don't try to be productive or solve problems. Just be present with whatever thoughts or ideas arise. You might feel restless at first. Your mind might jump from topic to topic. That's normal. You're not trying to achieve a particular state or have a profound experience. You're simply creating space for your natural creativity to surface. Pay attention to what your mind does when it's not being directed or entertained. What problems does it naturally gravitate toward? What connections does it make on its own? What ideas emerge when you're not trying to have ideas? This isn't about becoming a hermit or rejecting all forms of input and stimulation. It's about finding balance. It's about recognizing that in a world full of noise, silence becomes a competitive advantage. While everyone else is consuming information constantly, you're creating space for innovation. While others are reacting to whatever content comes their way, you're generating original ideas. While the world gets louder and more distracting, you're developing the ability to access your own creative resources. Innovation whispers in silence, but shouts in noise. The breakthrough idea you're looking for might already be there, waiting quietly in the background of your mind. But you'll never hear it if you don't create the conditions for listening. So give yourself the gift of creative silence, not as an escape from the world, but as a way to engage with it more thoughtfully. Not as a luxury you can't afford, but as a necessity you can't ignore. Your most innovative ideas are already within you. They're just waiting for a quiet moment to introduce themselves. Chapter 7. Healing Silence, Recovery, and Restoration. Your body is constantly talking to you, but most of the time, you're too busy to listen. Right now, as you're hearing these words, your heart is beating, your lungs are breathing, your digestive system is working. All of this is happening without your conscious control, guided by an intelligence that's been keeping you alive since before you were born. But when was the last time you actually listened to this conversation? When did you last pause long enough to hear what your body is trying to tell you? We live in a culture that treats the body like a machine, something to be optimized, fixed, or pushed through whatever demands we place on it. But your body isn't a machine. It's a living system that's incredibly sensitive to your environment, your emotions, and your stress levels. And one of the most powerful tools for supporting this system is something completely free and always available: silence. Let's start with what happens in your body when you experience genuine quiet. Not just the absence of external noise, but true restful silence. Your nervous system, which has been operating in constant alert mode, finally gets permission to shift gears. Most of us spend our days in what's called sympathetic nervous system activation, the fight or flight response. Traffic, deadlines, notifications, conflicts, even positive excitement. All of these keep your body in a state of readiness for action. Your heart rate stays elevated. Your muscles remain tense. Stress hormones like cortisol circulate through your bloodstream. This isn't necessarily bad in short bursts. Your nervous system is designed to handle acute stress. But when this activation becomes chronic, when you never fully shift out of alert mode, your body starts to break down. Your immune system weakens. Your sleep suffers, your digestion struggles, your mood becomes unstable. Silence activates the opposite system, the parasympathetic nervous system. This is sometimes called the rest and digest response, but it's really much more than that. It's your body's healing mode. When you're in parasympathetic activation, your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens, your muscles relax. Your body produces different hormones, ones that support repair, growth, and restoration. But here's what's fascinating. You can't think your way into this state. You can't force your nervous system to calm down through willpower alone. It responds to environmental cues, and one of the most powerful cues is the presence or absence of stimulation. When you create genuine quiet, both externally and internally, you're sending a signal to your nervous system that it's safe to let down its guard. You're telling your body, there's no emergency right now. You can focus on healing instead of defending. This is why silence has been used as medicine across cultures for thousands of years. Ancient healing traditions understood something that modern science is just beginning to measure. The body heals better in quiet. Recent research has shown remarkable effects of regular silence practice on physical health. Blood pressure decreases. Inflammation markers improve. Immune function strengthens. Sleep quality increases. Even gene expression changes. Genes associated with stress and inflammation become less active, while genes linked to healing and repair become more active. But perhaps the most important aspect of healing silence isn't what it does to your body. It's what it reveals about your body. When you get quiet enough, you start to notice things you've been missing. The chronic tension in your shoulders. The shallow breathing you've developed as a stress response. The way your stomach tightens when you think about certain situations. This awareness isn't comfortable at first. You might notice pain you've been ignoring, fatigue you've been pushing through, or emotions you've been avoiding. But this noticing is the first step in healing. You can't address what you don't acknowledge. Now, this is especially important for people who have experienced trauma. Trauma lives in the body, not just in the mind. It creates patterns of hypervigilance, chronic tension, and nervous system dysregulation that can persist long after the original events have passed. For trauma survivors, silence needs to be approached carefully. Sometimes quiet can feel dangerous rather than healing, especially if trauma occurred in isolated or quiet environments. The goal isn't to force silence, but to gradually create safe spaces where the nervous system can begin to trust quiet again. This might start with very short periods, just a minute or two of intentional breathing. Or it might involve what's called co-regulation, experiencing quiet in the presence of someone who feels safe and calm. The key is honoring your body's wisdom about what feels safe and what doesn't. For everyone, trauma survivor or not, healing silence is different from forced silence. Healing silence is chosen, not imposed. It's gentle, not harsh. It's spacious, not constrictive. It allows whatever needs to surface, without judgment or pressure to fix anything. Let's talk about what this might look like in practice. Maybe you've been carrying chronic stress, and you decide to create a daily practice of quiet time. You might start by simply sitting in a comfortable chair for 10 minutes each morning, doing nothing but breathing naturally. At first, you might notice how busy your mind is, how hard it is to sit still, how many physical sensations you usually ignore. Your back might ache, your mind might race, you might feel restless or anxious. This isn't a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's information about your current state. Over time, as you continue this practice, you might notice changes. Your breathing might naturally deepen. Your muscles might begin to relax in ways they haven't in years. You might start to sleep better, digest food more easily, or feel less reactive to everyday stressors. But the most profound changes often happen in your relationship with your own experience. Instead of constantly trying to fix, change, or escape whatever you're feeling, you begin to develop what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to be present with difficult experiences without being overwhelmed by them. This is a form of emotional healing that goes beyond just feeling better. It's about developing a different relationship with feeling bad. Instead of seeing discomfort as an emergency that needs immediate fixing, you learn to see it as information that deserves attention. For many people, this is revolutionary. We're conditioned to believe that any discomfort is a problem to be solved immediately. Pain means take a pill. Sadness means distract yourself. Anxiety means avoid whatever's causing it. But healing often requires the opposite, staying present with discomfort long enough to understand what it's trying to communicate. Silence creates the space for this kind of listening. When you're not constantly rushing to fix or change your experience, you can actually hear what your body and emotions are trying to tell you. Maybe that chronic headache is your body's way of saying you need better boundaries at work. Maybe that persistent anxiety is alerting you to something in your environment that needs attention. Maybe that bone-deep fatigue is your system's way of insisting you slow down and rest. This doesn't mean you should never seek medical help or that all symptoms can be resolved through quiet attention. But it does mean that your body often has wisdom about what it needs if you can create enough space to listen. Let's try something together right now. This is what I call a healing moment, a brief opportunity to connect with your body's natural intelligence. Place your hand on your heart and feel it beating. Don't try to change anything about your heartbeat. Just notice it. This heart has been beating since before you were born. It will continue beating while you sleep tonight, while you dream, while you're not even thinking about it. This is your body's wisdom, speaking to you in the language of silence. It doesn't need your conscious control or management. It knows what to do. Take a moment to appreciate this incredible system that's keeping you alive right now, without any effort on your part. Notice your breath as well. Again, don't try to control it, just observe it. Your lungs are exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide. Your cells are receiving what they need, all of this happening in a silence deeper than words. This is the healing power of simple presence. You're not trying to fix anything or achieve any particular state. You're just acknowledging the miraculous processes that are always happening within you. Now, as you continue with your day, you might occasionally return to this awareness, not as a task or obligation, but as a resource. When you feel stressed or overwhelmed, you can remember that underneath all the mental noise, your body is quietly doing its work of keeping you alive and healthy. This is what I mean when I say that silence doesn't just heal, it reveals what needs healing. Sometimes what needs healing isn't a specific symptom or problem, but your relationship with your own aliveness, your ability to trust the wisdom of your own system, your capacity to be present with whatever you're experiencing without immediately trying to change it. Building resilience through regular silence practice isn't about becoming immune to stress or difficulty. It's about developing the inner resources to meet life's challenges from a place of groundedness rather than reactivity. When you have a regular practice of quiet connection with yourself, you're less likely to be completely overwhelmed by unexpected difficulties. You have a felt sense of your own stability, your own capacity to handle whatever arises. This doesn't happen overnight. Like physical fitness, emotional and nervous system resilience develops gradually through consistent practice. But even small, regular doses of healing silence can begin to shift your baseline state from chronic stress toward greater ease and presence. The goal isn't to eliminate all stress from your life. That's neither possible nor desirable. The goal is to develop the capacity to return to calm, to find your center again after being knocked off balance, to trust that your system knows how to heal if you give it the right conditions. And one of the most powerful conditions for healing is the simplest, genuine quiet, chosen freely, experienced with gentle attention to whatever arises. Your body is already wise. Your nervous system already knows how to regulate itself. Your immune system already knows how to heal. Sometimes the most profound medicine is simply getting out of the way and letting these natural processes do their work. In the silence between heartbeats, between breaths, between thoughts, your body is constantly regenerating itself. Every moment, old cells are dying and new ones are being born. This is the miracle of your own aliveness, happening in silence, happening right now. Silence doesn't just heal, it reveals what needs healing. And sometimes what needs healing is simply your willingness to trust the wisdom that's been with you all along. Chapter 8. Living Silently in a Noisy World. Picture this. You're sitting in your car at a red light, and instead of immediately reaching for your phone, you take a breath and notice the moment. The weight of your hands on the steering wheel. The sound of your own heartbeat. Just 30 seconds of unexpected quiet in the middle of your busy day. This is what I mean when I talk about living silently in a noisy world. It's not about retreating to a mountaintop monastery or demanding that everyone around you whisper. It's about finding pockets of genuine quiet within the chaos of modern life and learning to carry that inner stillness with you wherever you go. Let's be honest about what we're up against here. The world has gotten exponentially louder in just the past few decades. Not just physically louder, though that's certainly true, the hum of air conditioners, the drone of traffic, the ping of notifications, but also mentally louder. The constant stream of information, opinions, and demands for our attention. Your great-grandmother probably experienced more genuine quiet in a single day than many of us get in a week. She might have spent hours in silence while doing household tasks, walking to the market, or simply sitting on the porch in the evening. Quiet wasn't something she had to seek out. It was woven into the fabric of daily life. Today, silence has become almost exotic. We've created a world where being alone with our thoughts feels strange, where a moment without stimulation makes us reach for our phones, where restaurants pipe in background music because the sound of people eating together feels too intimate. But here's what I've discovered. You can create islands of silence even in the noisiest environments. You could develop an inner quiet that remains steady regardless of what's happening around you. And you could design your daily life to include regular encounters with genuine stillness. Let's start with your physical environment. Look around the space where you spend most of your time. What sounds are competing for your attention right now? The television in the background, the notifications sound from your devices, the hum of appliances, maybe even music you put on to fill the silence. I'm not suggesting you need to live like a monk, but consider this. Every sound in your environment is either supporting your nervous system or subtly activating it. That constant low-level background noise, even if you think you've tuned it out, requires mental energy to process. Try this experiment. Choose 1 hour of your day to experience true quiet in your space. Turn off the television, put your phone in another room, maybe even unplug that humming refrigerator if you can. Just sit in the actual sounds of your environment, the settling of the house, the distant traffic, your own breathing. Most people are amazed by what they discover in this experiment. Sounds they never noticed before. A quality of presence they forgot was possible. Sometimes even a slight anxiety about the absence of familiar background noise. All of this is valuable information about how your environment has been affecting you without your awareness. Creating silent spaces doesn't require a complete life overhaul. Maybe it's designating your bedroom as a device-free zone. Maybe it's taking your morning coffee outside before the neighborhood fully wakes up. Maybe it's claiming a corner of your home where quiet is the default, not the exception. The key is intentionality. Instead of noise being something that just happens to you, you begin making conscious choices about your sound environment. You start treating silence as something valuable that deserves protection. Now, let's talk about something that makes many people uncomfortable: silence in relationships. We've been conditioned to believe that constant conversation is the sign of a healthy connection, that quiet moments between people indicate awkwardness or distance. But think about the people you feel most comfortable with. Chances are, these are the people with whom you can sit in silence without feeling the need to fill every moment with words. There's something profound about being able to simply exist in someone's presence without performing or entertaining. Comfortable silence between people is actually a sign of deep intimacy and trust. It says, I don't need to manage your experience of me. I can just be here with you. This kind of presence is becoming increasingly rare in our conversation-driven culture. If you want to cultivate this in your relationships, start small. When you're with someone you care about, resist the urge to fill every pause with words. Let conversations breathe. Allow for moments of shared quiet while you're walking together, sitting together, even eating together. You might be surprised by what emerges in these quiet spaces. Often, the most meaningful exchanges happen after a pause, when someone has had time to feel what they actually want to say rather than just reacting to fill the silence. This applies to your relationship with yourself as well. How often do you actually spend time in your own company without distraction? without music, podcasts, television, or even books. Just you, present with whatever you're thinking and feeling in the moment. Many people discover they've been avoiding this kind of self-intimacy for years. There's something vulnerable about being alone with your own mind, especially if you're used to constant external stimulation. But this is where some of the most important conversations of your life can happen, the ones you have with yourself. Let's shift to something that might surprise you, the role of silence in professional life. In a culture that values quick responses and constant availability, the person who knows how to use strategic silence often has a significant advantage. Think about the most effective leaders you've encountered. Chances are they knew when to speak and when to listen. They weren't trying to fill every meeting with their own voice. They understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is create space for others to think and respond. There's a particular kind of silence that happens in good decision-making. Before reacting to a difficult situation, before immediately solving someone else's problem, before jumping to conclusions, there's a pause where you can actually feel what the situation is asking for. This isn't hesitation or indecision. It's the wisdom to know that your first impulse might not be your best response. It's the confidence to sit with uncertainty long enough to let clarity emerge. I know a CEO who instituted what she calls thinking meetings, gatherings where the team sits quietly for the first 10 minutes, considering the challenges they're facing before anyone speaks. She says the quality of discussion that follows these silent periods is completely different from their usual rapid-fire brainstorming sessions. The silence allows people to move past their immediate reactions and access deeper insight. Ideas that might never have surfaced in constant conversation have room to emerge. People who are normally quiet in meetings find their voices. The whole dynamic shifts. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, technology. Our devices have become the primary obstacle between us and silence, not just because of the sounds they make, but because of how they've trained our attention to constantly seek stimulation. You probably know this feeling. You pick up your phone to check the time, and 20 minutes later you're still scrolling through social media. This isn't a personal failing. It's the predictable result of systems designed to capture and hold your attention. The path back to silence requires creating new boundaries with these tools. This doesn't mean abandoning technology, but it does mean being intentional about when and how you engage with it. Consider implementing what I call silence anchors throughout your day. Specific times when devices are off limits. Maybe the first hour after you wake up. Maybe during meals. Maybe the hour before bed. These aren't punishments. They're gifts of presence you give yourself. Start with just one anchor period and notice what happens. You might feel anxious at first, like you're missing something important. This is normal. Your nervous system has become accustomed to constant input, and the absence of stimulation can initially feel uncomfortable. But stick with it for a few days. Notice how your relationship with your own thoughts begins to change. Notice how meals taste different when you're actually present with the food. Notice how your sleep improves when your mind has time to settle before bed. The goal isn't to become anti-technology, but to reclaim your right to choose when you engage with it. To remember that you can exist perfectly well without constant connection to the digital stream of information and opinion. Here's your daily practice for this chapter, and it's simpler than you might expect. Start with just 2 minutes of intentional silence each morning. Set a timer, sit comfortably, and do absolutely nothing but exist in the quiet. Don't try to meditate. Don't try to solve problems. Don't try to achieve any particular state. Just sit with whatever arises in those 2 minutes. This is your foundation, a daily reminder that you can be present with yourself without needing to be entertained or productive. 2 minutes might sound almost insultingly brief, but consistency matters more than duration. It's better to do 2 minutes every day for a month than to do 30 minutes once and then give up because it feels too overwhelming. As this practice becomes natural, you might find yourself wanting to extend it, or you might discover other moments throughout your day where you can choose silence over stimulation. The key is starting where you are with what feels manageable. Remember, You're not trying to eliminate all noise from your life or become someone who never speaks. You're developing a friendship with silence, learning to see it as an ally rather than something to avoid. You're also developing what I think of as portable quiet, the ability to access inner stillness even when your external environment is chaotic. This is perhaps the most practical skill you can develop for living in our noisy world. When you have a relationship with silence, you carry that refuge with you. You can find moments of genuine rest in the middle of a busy day. You can respond to challenges from a place of groundedness rather than reactivity. You can be fully present with the people and experiences that matter most to you. A life touched by silence is a life of deeper meaning and connection. Not because silence is inherently superior to sound, but because the rhythm between speaking and listening, between action and rest, between engagement and solitude, this rhythm is natural to human beings. We've forgotten this rhythm in our eagerness to fill every moment with activity and stimulation. But it's still there, waiting for us to remember, waiting for us to create space for the conversations that can only happen in quiet, with ourselves, with others, and with the mystery of simply being alive. The world will continue to be noisy. Technology will continue to demand our attention. Life will continue to present us with challenges and opportunities that require our engagement. But within all of this, you can choose to cultivate spaces of genuine quiet. These spaces become your refuge, your resource, and ultimately, your gift to a world that has forgotten the power of simply being still. Conclusion. Here we are, at the end of our journey together through the profound landscape of silence. But really, this isn't an ending, it's a beginning. You've discovered something that most people spend their entire lives missing. That silence isn't the absence of something, it's the presence of everything. Think about where we started. You might have come to this audiobook seeing silence as empty space to be filled, awkward pauses to be avoided, or simply the opposite of noise. But now you know better. You've learned that silence is where wisdom lives, where creativity flourishes, where healing happens, and where your truest self emerges. We've explored how silence shapes your thoughts, how it transforms your relationships, how it reveals the intelligence of your body, and how it can be your companion even in the noisiest environments. But more than that, you've felt it for yourself. In those moments of quiet we share together, you've tasted something that can't be explained, only experienced. This experience changes you. Once you've felt the depth that exists in genuine stillness, you can't go back to seeing it as empty. Once you've heard the conversation your body is always having with you, you can't unhear it. Once you've touched that place of inner quiet, you carry it with you wherever you go. And you'll need to carry it with you, because the world you're returning to hasn't changed. It's still loud, still demanding, still trying to convince you that your worth is measured by how much noise you make, how quickly you respond, how constantly you're productive and available. But here's what I want you to remember as you return to your daily life. In a world that profits from your noise, your silence is an act of rebellion. In a culture that fears quiet, your comfort with silence is a superpower. Every time you choose to pause before reacting, you're rebelling against a culture of instant response. Every time you sit with your own thoughts instead of reaching for your phone, you're reclaiming something precious. Every time you offer someone the gift of your full presence instead of divided attention, you're demonstrating a different way of being human. This isn't about becoming antisocial or withdrawing from life. It's about engaging with life from a deeper place. It's about speaking when you have something worth saying and listening when someone has something worth hearing. It's about acting from wisdom instead of impulse, from groundedness instead of reactivity. You now know that the most profound conversations often happen in silence, with yourself, with others, with the mystery of existence itself. You know that creativity emerges from stillness, that healing happens in quiet, that love deepens in presence. The ancient poet Rumi understood this when he wrote, "Silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation." You're learning to become fluent in this sacred language. Not the silence of emptiness or avoidance, but the silence of fullness, of presence, of deep listening. This fluency will serve you in ways you can't yet imagine. In moments of crisis, you'll find it still center within yourself. In relationships, you'll offer the rare gift of truly being with someone. In creativity, you'll access insights that only emerge in quiet. In leadership, you'll know when to speak and when to listen. But perhaps most importantly, you'll develop a different relationship with being alive. Instead of constantly trying to fill or fix your experience, you'll learn to be present with whatever arises. This is true freedom, not the absence of difficulties, but the capacity to meet life from a place of inner stability. Now, I have a request. If this audiobook has touched your life, if these ideas have resonated with something deep within you, please subscribe to this channel for more transformative content. Your subscription tells me that this kind of exploration matters to you, and it helps this message reach others who need to hear it. But more than that, share this with someone who needs to discover the power of silence. You know someone who's constantly stressed, always rushing, never present. You know someone who's lost touch with their own inner wisdom. This could be the gift that changes their life. And most importantly, go forth and practice the art of meaningful quiet. Don't let this be something you only think about. Make it something you live. Start with those 2 minutes each morning. Notice the silence between heartbeats. Choose presence over productivity, at least sometimes. Remember that you're not trying to become someone who never speaks. You're becoming someone who speaks from silence, who acts from stillness, who lives from a place of inner quiet. This is a lifelong practice, not a destination you reach. Some days you'll forget everything we've talked about. You'll get caught up in the noise and rush of daily life. That's perfectly human. But now you have something to return to. You know there's another way to be in the world. Before we part ways, I want to offer you one final gift. I'm going to leave you with 30 seconds of silence, not as an ending, but as a beginning. In this quiet space, set an intention for how you'll use the power of silence in your own life. What will you remember? What will you practice? How will you honor the sacred language you're learning to speak? This silence belongs to you now. Take it with you. Share it with others. Let it be your refuge and your resource. In a world full of noise, may you always remember the profound power of choosing quiet. Here is your gift of silence. Let it speak to you in ways that words never could. May you find peace in the quiet spaces. May you discover wisdom in the pauses. And may you always remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be still